Famous people are usually remembered for the scale of their lives. They conquered empires, transformed art, challenged science, or entertained millions. Their deaths are expected to match that scale. A battlefield, a palace, an assassination, or a final speech surrounded by witnesses. But history does not always provide a dramatic ending. Sometimes a conqueror dies from an illness no one can identify. Sometimes a king laughs at a joke and never stops. Sometimes a famous artist is killed by the very object that made her recognizable. And sometimes the person who escaped every chain, coffin, and water tank is finally defeated by an ordinary medical emergency. These are the most bizarre deaths of the world's most famous people. Aeschylus was one of the founders of Western drama. Born in Athens around 525 BCE, he wrote tragedies that still shape modern theater, including the Persians and the Oresteia trilogy. His plays dealt with murder, revenge, divine punishment, and the collapse of powerful families. Death was not a side detail in Aeschylus's work. It was one of his central subjects. In 456 BCE, Aeschylus was living in Gela, Sicily. According to several ancient accounts, he was sitting outdoors when an eagle or large vulture flew overhead carrying a tortoise. The bird wanted to break the shell. Birds of prey are known to drop hard objects onto rocks to reach what is inside. But this bird apparently made a disastrous calculation. It mistook Aeschylus's bald head for a stone. The tortoise fell from the sky and struck the playwright directly on the skull. The impact killed him. The story may have been exaggerated by later writers. Ancient historians often filled gaps in the record with dramatic explanations. But the behavior of birds dropping animals or bones onto rocks is real, which means the account is not physically impossible. Aeschylus wrote tragedies about fate defeating human pride. His own ending required no playwright. King Martin I of Aragon ruled Aragon and Sicily from 1395 until 1410. His reign was politically important, but his death became famous for a different reason. The story begins with food. Martin reportedly ate an entire goose. Medieval accounts disagree about how it was prepared, but they agree that the king was suffering from severe indigestion afterward. Then his court jester entered the room. The jester told Martin that he had seen a young deer hanging from a grapevine by its teeth. When the king asked how such a strange thing could happen, the jester explained that a mouse had bitten the deer, causing the animal to leap backward onto the vine. The image was absurd. A mouse defeating a deer hanging from a grapevine. A royal court discussing the logic of an impossible animal accident. Martin began to laugh. According to the chronicles, the laughter became uncontrollable. Combined with the enormous meal and his physical distress, it led to a medical collapse. He died on May 31, 1410. The exact medical cause remains uncertain. He may have suffered a heart attack, a stroke, or a severe digestive complication. He may not have literally laughed himself to death, but the political consequences were real. Martin left no legitimate heir. His death ended the House of Barcelona and helped trigger the Compromise of Caspi, which transferred the Aragonese crown to the House of Trastamara. A joke about a mouse changed the succession of a kingdom. Tycho Brahe spent his life measuring the heavens. The Danish astronomer built some of the most accurate astronomical observations made before the invention of the telescope. His data later allowed Johannes Kepler to calculate the laws of planetary motion. Brahe was a serious man with an unusual appearance. He had lost part of his nose in a duel and reportedly wore a metal replacement. He also maintained a pet elk that supposedly died after falling down a staircase while drunk. His own death was even stranger. In 1601, Brahe attended a formal dinner in Prague. According to the traditional story, he refused to leave the table to urinate because doing so would have violated court etiquette. He held his urine for too long, damaged his bladder, and became fatally ill. The story is memorable. It is also not completely secure. Brahe became sick after the dinner and died about 11 days later. Later examinations of his remains did not establish that his bladder burst. Researchers found elevated mercury, but not enough to prove acute poisoning. Modern historians have proposed prostate disease, kidney failure, infection, or another urinary complication, so the famous image of an astronomer dying because he was too polite to use the bathroom may be partly embroidered. Still, the irony survives. A man who studied the motion of planets may have been defeated by the pressure of a single ordinary organ. Alexander the Great conquered an empire stretching from Greece to parts of modern Pakistan. By the age of 32, he had defeated the Persian Empire, crossed Central Asia, and reached India. Then, in Babylon in 323 BCE, he became sick. The illness lasted about 12 days. Ancient accounts describe fever, severe abdominal pain, progressive paralysis, and a gradual loss of movement. Alexander reportedly remained mentally alert while his body stopped responding. When he finally appeared unable to move, his soldiers gathered around him. They wanted to see him one last time. One by one, they passed before the bed while Alexander could no longer speak. His death created an immediate political crisis because he had not named a clear successor. But the most bizarre detail came afterward. Ancient writers claimed that Alexander's body showed no obvious signs of decomposition for 6 days. One modern theory suggests that he may have suffered Guillain-Barré syndrome, a neurological disorder that can cause paralysis while leaving the mind clear. His breathing may have become so faint that physicians declared him dead too early. If that theory is correct, Alexander may have been alive for days after his official death. The man who defeated armies may have been trapped inside a body that looked lifeless but had not yet stopped. His empire did not survive him. Perhaps he did not immediately survive himself. Attila the Hun was one of the most feared rulers of late antiquity. He raided the Roman Empire, threatened Constantinople, invaded Gaul, and forced powerful rulers to negotiate from a position of fear. He died in 453 CE, not in battle, not by assassination, not while leading a raid. Attila had just married a young woman named Ildiko. During the wedding celebration, he reportedly drank heavily and later went to bed in a drunken state. That night, he suffered a severe nosebleed. According to the 6th century historian Jordanes, Attila was too intoxicated to wake up. The blood ran down his throat and suffocated him. The account may be incomplete. Some historians have suggested internal bleeding, alcohol poisoning, or assassination. Later stories accused Ildiko of murdering him, but those claims are not firmly established. What is certain is that Attila's death caused immediate instability. His sons fought over the empire, and within a generation, the Hunnic power structure had collapsed. The man who made emperors tremble died because his own body failed to respond to a nosebleed. History remembers the invader. The final weapon was gravity. Isadora Duncan revolutionized modern dance by rejecting rigid ballet traditions. She performed barefoot, wore loose clothing, and treated the body as something that should move naturally rather than obey strict theatrical rules. Her long, flowing silk scarf became part of her public image. In September 1927, Duncan was riding in an open automobile in Nice, France. The scarf was draped around her neck. As the car moved, the fabric became caught in the vehicle's exposed wheel. The scarf tightened instantly. It pulled Duncan from the car and broke her neck. She died almost immediately. The death was so visually connected to her style that it became part of her legend. The woman famous for movement was killed by a piece of fabric moving in the wrong direction. There was no assassin, no political plot, no complicated machine, only a scarf, an open wheel, and a moment too fast for anyone to stop. Her death also created a grim warning about fashion and technology. Loose clothing, scarves, and machinery had already caused accidents before Duncan, but her fame transformed one private danger into a permanent historical image. She had spent her life trying to make movement look free. Her final movement was completely uncontrolled. Franz Reichelt believed he had solved one of the most dangerous problems in early aviation. In 1912, the Austrian-born tailor designed a wearable parachute suit. He imagined that pilots could leap from damaged aircraft and float safely to the ground. The device had been tested on mannequins. The results were poor. Several of the dummies fell without opening correctly. Reichelt still believed the design needed a human test. He received permission to jump from the first level of the Eiffel Tower. Officials expected him to use a dummy. Instead, Reichelt arrived wearing the suit himself. On February 4, 1912, he climbed onto the platform. Crowds gathered below. Cameras were present. The scene was recorded. Then he jumped. The parachute failed to open. Reichelt fell more than 50 meters and struck the ground. The event became one of the earliest, widely circulated filmed deaths. It was not an accident hidden from history. It was a public demonstration that the inventor had decided to perform personally after earlier tests had already raised serious doubts. Reichelt wanted to prove that his invention could save lives. The test proved only that confidence is not the same as evidence. Harry Houdini built his career by escaping from situations designed to look impossible. He broke out of handcuffs, locked boxes, underwater cells, chains, and sealed containers. His audience watched him survive conditions that appeared to leave no room for survival. In October 1926, Houdini was performing in Montreal. A student named J. Gordon Whitehead asked whether Houdini could withstand powerful punches to the abdomen. Houdini reportedly agreed that he could, but he was not prepared when Whitehead suddenly struck him several times. Houdini continued working despite severe pain. Days later, he was hospitalized with appendicitis. His appendix ruptured, causing peritonitis. He died on Halloween, October 31, 1926, at the age of 52. Doctors at the time believed the punches may have caused or accelerated the rupture. Modern medical opinion remains less certain. Appendicitis can become fatal without any punch at all. The public, however, remembered the more dramatic version. The greatest escape artist in America had survived underwater prisons and buried coffins, only to die after a student asked him a question in a dressing room. His final escape was the one he could not rehearse. Grigori Rasputin became famous as a mystic, healer, and controversial advisor to the Russian royal family. By 1916, rumors described him as a dangerous influence over Tsarina Alexandra and her son, the hemophiliac heir Alexei. A group of aristocrats decided that Rasputin had to die. The later story is almost impossible to believe. According to the memoir of Felix Yusupov, the conspirators first gave Rasputin poisoned cakes and wine. The poison supposedly failed. They then shot him. He allegedly survived, ran outside, and was shot again. The conspirators claimed he was finally beaten, bound, and thrown into the icy Neva River. When his body was recovered, they said water was found in his lungs, proving that he had still been alive when he entered the river. The story made Rasputin appear nearly supernatural, but historians distrust many parts of it. Yusupov had strong reasons to exaggerate the event, and later forensic interpretations suggest that Rasputin probably died from gunshot wounds rather than poison or drowning. The famous man who supposedly survived everything may have been killed in a much more ordinary way. The legend needed a monster. The evidence offers a murder. Tennessee Williams wrote some of the most famous American plays of the 20th century, including A Streetcar Named Desire, The Glass Menagerie, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. His writing was intense, psychological, and often centered on characters trapped by memory, addiction, desire, and social pressure. In 1983, Williams died in a hotel room in New York City. The official account stated that he choked on the plastic cap of an eye drop bottle. The detail sounds too strange to be real. That is one reason it became so widely repeated. Williams had been drinking and using drugs, and some of his friends disputed the official explanation. Later speculation suggested that he may have died from an interaction involving alcohol and medication. The exact circumstances remain debated, but the documented version remains brutally mundane. A playwright who created grand emotional tragedies died because a small plastic object entered his airway. His characters often struggled against forces they could not control. His own ending involved an object barely worth noticing. Jack Daniel became one of the most recognizable names in American whiskey. His distillery grew into a global brand, but the story of his death begins with a safe. One morning, Daniel reportedly arrived at work and could not open it. He had forgotten the combination. Frustrated, he kicked the safe. The injury damaged his toe. The wound became infected. In the era before modern antibiotics, infections that appear minor today could spread through the body and become fatal. Daniel eventually died from blood poisoning in 1911. The story has been repeated for generations because it compresses a powerful lesson into a single image. A man whose name became attached to bottles around the world was defeated by a safe he could not open and a toe he should not have kicked. Whether every detail of the popular version is exact is difficult to prove, but the underlying danger was real. Before antibiotics, a small wound could become a fatal infection within days. The whiskey survived. The man who made it did not. Brandon Lee was the son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee and had begun establishing his own career as an actor. In 1993, he was filming The Crow in Wilmington, North Carolina. A scene required a gun to be fired toward his character. The production used a revolver that had previously been loaded with dummy cartridges for close-up shots. But a projectile had become lodged in the barrel during an earlier preparation. When a blank cartridge was later fired, the blank produced enough force to propel the lodged projectile. Lee was struck in the abdomen. The crew initially believed he was acting. The injury was discovered only after the scene had been filmed. Lee died in the hospital at the age of 28. His death became one of the most unsettling accidents in modern film history because the weapon was supposed to contain no live ammunition. The scene was fictional. The danger was not. Brandon Lee's death led to renewed scrutiny of firearms on film sets and became a permanent warning about the difference between a prop and a real weapon. The camera kept recording. The actor never returned to the set. These deaths are bizarre because the lives behind them were enormous. A playwright was struck by a tortoise. A king laughed after eating a goose. An astronomer may have been defeated by etiquette. A dancer was killed by her signature scarf. A magician died from a medical crisis after a casual punch. The details feel almost fictional because people expect famous lives to end with meaning. But death rarely follows narrative structure. It arrives through a weak organ, a loose piece of fabric, an unnoticed infection, a failed mechanism, or one decision made in the wrong second. That is the final irony. The world's most famous people could control empires, audiences, laboratories, stages, and machines. They could not control the small, ordinary events waiting inside those worlds, and sometimes history's strangest endings are the ones that need no invention at all.